All right, one, two, three. This is my Bible. It is Yah's word. It is the inspired, infallible word of Yah. It is a lamp unto my feet. Blessed are those who hear the word of Yah and keep it. I find out who I am in the pages contained herein. This is my Bible. Good morning. How is everyone doing today? Doing well. Thank you for asking. Glad to hear. Today's message is titled Spiritual Welfare. Now, this is not meant to be a controversial message, but I'm sure some people will take it that way. But if people aren't being offended or checking themselves and examining themselves on what you say, are you really saying anything? There was a time in Scripture when Jesus preached a message and his followers, the people we don't know names, they said, "This is a tough message. We ain't down with this. We're through." And it said they left. There was a lot of people that left. Now, this isn't welfare as in doing well, like someone's welfare. This is like the bad, the poor people welfare. Because some people, some of us, have been on some spiritual welfare. Now, this isn't titled spiritual warfare, because we know all about that. A few times in this church, in the past few sermons, Paul said that we will have a fight of spiritual proportions, did he not? He didn't say, get your swords ready. He said our battle is not against flesh and blood. But he said it would be a fight, right? He didn't say the battle's not against flesh and blood because there is no battle. He's like, no, the battle is actually against these principalities, these powers, these rulers in the heavenly realms. This spiritual battle that we're fighting. And just a refresher, when I did a study, I shared a study on what those groups were. The powers are the group of heavenly beings that guide nations. They're the ones that say this person is going to be the president, this person is going to be the senator, this person is going to be the governor, this person is going to be Caesar, this person is going to be king. Paul has experience in this fight against nations, does he not? Because the nation that is oppressing him and his people used to light his people on fire at night to light the streets. They were the street lights. That crazy emperor would round up those new believers, douse them in something flammable, and light them on fire, and they would light the streets at night. So Paul knows about the fight being against nations, because he was against the nation of Rome, right? This nation used to throw his people into the circus. Now, this is not Barnum and Bailey, not Siegfried and Roy type of circus. This circus back in these times would throw people in the Colosseum and see them go against lions and other vicious animals for entertainment. That is what the circus was. So Paul had firsthand knowledge about the nation being against his people, knowing that my battle is not against you, brother. It's against this nation, the people that are putting these wicked people in power. I think we all can relate to that, living in, and at times, an oppressive country. And some oppressive people get put in power. Do they not? And it's funny that now, today, we have Christians that align their faith to the nation. Paul said the fight is going to be against the nations. And some of us Christians are like, America first. All right. There's only one country that the Most High said he was for, and it was named after him. And the real Israel, not the bootleg Israel. After the powers, he mentions the principalities. Now, there's a number of things that the principalities do, but again, this is just a refresher. Go back and listen to the old sermon. I'm not going over that again. And I don't know if I'm going to be before you long or short. I didn't practice how long this would take. But the principalities are the group of heavenly beings that give mankind the arts and the sciences. Now, I do not say that to be anti-art or anti-science. I know some pastors would do that. I'm not doing that. But when someone comes at you screaming science, 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 or art, 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 it sounded like a cartoon dog, you need to be on guard. We have seen the trouble that science can do against the world just recently. We came out of a time period where we saw what science in the wrong hands, in the wicked hands, can do. We have seen what the art world has done as well to our people. Now, I'm not talking about an art painting. I'm talking about music, movies, things of that nature, the arts, as they call it. It's interesting that Paul said our battle is against those that give man music and movies. Because was our battle against the one above or the one that we think is below? The one that roams the earth seeking whom he can devour? That one. So our battle's against that one, right? What's the name for him? Satan. Satan works, because that's where we're going. So it's amazing that he said our battle is against Satan. Our battle's against the people that are giving us music and movies. And we can see those that are members of the synagogue of Satan are in charge of those mediums. And they don't hide it either. Now that's another sermon that would get me in trouble. I would get the video removed, so I'm going to stop there. But we should not be afraid of those groups because of what else Paul said. Now I'm going to continue into this, but I'm skipping to the end about how we're victorious. Because we don't live as defeated people, do we? Ephesians chapter 1, 19 through 21. The power is the same as the mighty strength he exerted when he raised Christ from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly realms, far above all rule and authority, power and dominion, and every name that is invoked, not only in the present age, but also in the one to come. So no matter what type of evil you try to bring up 2,000 years later, we are still above it. So he mentions the powers and the dominions. And again, if you research all of these names, those are part of the groups that I'm talking about. Paul said that the Most High's power is above all of those other heavenly beings and what they can do. So no matter what, the one that we serve is higher than the one that is out to get us, the one that the battle is against. So we know we have the spoiler alert that we win. It's not a mystery, right? But today's message is about spiritual welfare. So let's look at welfare in the natural so you can understand what I'm talking about. Welfare was a program that was created to help people in poverty. We have the term welfare check when the police come and make sure someone is alive and well. But in the 70s, social workers would come to your house and see if the woman that was receiving welfare had a man living in the house. They would look for signs to make sure she's not getting any other income so that the government was the only one providing income for her. There was a movie in the 70s called Claudine, and it talked about this. This was a real thing that happened where the government, because that's what the social work is, that's what welfare is, was designed specifically to make sure women didn't have men in the house. Because if you have a man in the house, we ain't giving you money. You know how the enemy tries to take men out of the house, right? Our battle is not against flesh and blood. It's against the people that are empowering the nation. The government. Again, this is what Paul said. People are going to think I'm being controversial, but Paul said this. So the enemy tries to take men out the house. Kind of like how the art and music tries to take men out the house. We have men thinking they shouldn't get married. Oh, that's a risk. You don't want to get married. You a high-value man. You can't be, and you definitely can't date a single mom, even though you were raised by one. It's good enough for you to be raised by, but not good enough for you to marry. That's another sermon. We have all these songs on our radio by men and women being promiscuous. Yet all those artists are at home, happily married. They aren't living hot girl summers. They are making their husband breakfast. These artists will tell our children to hustle and sell drugs while they send their children to college. So they want our children to be on the corner, but they want their children to be in the classroom. It's kind of like somebody's in control of this and telling the artist, this is the songs you have to make. If you've watched any documentary on any hip-hop artist, they'll tell you that. Like, yeah, I don't want to make these songs. They told me to. It's amazing that in our history, that the family unit, and I'm being slightly racial here, and that's fine. Tar, can you fix that? The mouse is right by your seat. It's amazing that in our history, that the family unit was able to sustain through so much. If you look at the Black Americans' history in this country, men fought through slavery and stayed together with their families. If they were separated, men would escape, men would figure out a way to find their freedom and find their family's freedom. The marriage and the family was intact. After slavery, you can look at Jim Crow laws. They fought through and stayed a family. Incarceration laws fought through, stayed with their family. But when welfare was introduced, I'm going somewhere with this. When welfare was introduced by the nation, because it's hard to say no to free stuff, they systematically removed a number of men out the house. Then, the next decade, when the powers, again, who did Paul say the fight is against? When the powers introduced heroin, and then a decade later introduced crack into our communities. Now, when people talk about the crack epidemic, they always focus on the crackhead. This crackhead, but we need to think about this three-dimensionally, okay? Or as Doc Brown says, fourth-dimensionally. That's a geek reference for people in here. 2 people got it, it's all good. This crackhead, who for the record, has government-sponsored drugs, because the government was getting paid from all the drug sales. This is documented to the high heavens. And there was a gentleman that uncovered all of this and wrote a book and wrote an article about it. And guess what happened to him? He died. But guess how he died? He, quote unquote, committed suicide by shooting himself in the back of the head with a shotgun twice.
Why?
He's talented. You can do that. I don't even know how you can even hold a shotgun to the back of your head, let alone shoot twice. So, this crackhead who is under the influence of government-sponsored drugs wants to get another hit. To get this, he is willing to do anything. He will steal, he will kill, he will destroy. Who does that sound like? Who's our battle against? The crime rate went exponentially up during this time period. Ask some people in here that are over 40 how the 80s were. Some people try to color this as this great decade. Again, ask some people that were alive there, especially the people from Detroit. They'll tell you it was no picnic. Or LA. Any real city, they'll tell you. So you have people robbing and killing to get their next hit. So who are they robbing and killing? Not other crackheads.
Family, friends.
Other people in the community. And the more people that are dying, more men that are dying, that are being taken out of the home, which is the enemy's plan all along. See, now, when I did that sermon about dead men, y'all was all on it. It was way more, yeah. When I was talking about men being the problem, when I talk about it's the government that's the problem, because that's what Paul said. You know, it's, yeah. We'll go back to scripture. How about that? There is a systematic attack. This isn't controversial. Paul told us this 2,000 years ago in writing to the church in Ephesus, that there was going to be a battle. So if I talk about the evidence of said battle, it's not Darren being black militant up here. Right. It's what Paul said was going to happen. Who's Paul getting his inspiration from? The Son in heaven. He said, because in our minds we think Paul was on the road to Damascus, saw the light, and then started preaching. He writes and said, I needed to step away for 3 years to be retaught because I was taught the wrong way.
Right.
He said, the people in charge of the nations would attack us. But let's keep going. During all of this welfare checking, there was a man that ran for president in 1976. He vowed to break this system. And during his campaign, he kept telling stories about a woman in Chicago that was a quote-unquote welfare queen. This was a guy that made up that whole phrase. And he said, this welfare queen in Chicago, she's living the good life. She's getting all this money from the government, just living it up. And we need to stop that because the government should not be paying for this woman to have this luxurious life. Such woman did not exist, but it was ear-catching to the people that didn't want that to happen. The people that are fiscally conservative, this got them riled up. Like, we need to get behind this guy because he's right. We shouldn't be paying for these welfare queens, even though said welfare queens do not exist. Have you ever heard of WIC? Women, Infant, Children. This is another type of welfare program. It was designed to provide nutritious food for struggling families, well, for struggling women, infant, and children, not for men. If you're a man, go get a job. You don't need no help. And some of us, we believe that because that's what we've been pushed at the whole time of get up and work, man, get up and work. What if there's a problem? He don't get no WIC because he's not a W, I, or a C. Now, some of y'all are too young to remember, but WIC used to only get you the nasty flavors. You couldn't, like, I worked in the grocery store for 5 years, and it would be under the nasty stuff, it would say WIC approved. The good cereal, the good food wasn't WIC. The nasty stuff with no sugar was WIC. Again, some of you might not know, and praise be to the Most High that you do not know this man here. King Vitamin. Everybody says Vitamin, but it was always man. Now, true story. Now, WIC approved. Good for you guys. Your parents worked very hard, so you didn't have to eat that. Now, true story.
Probably healthier than what we ate, actually.
True story. One of the reasons I work so hard is so that my children never have to taste King Vitamin. Now, to my parents' credit, because we found this out maybe 3 or 4 years ago, that even when we had money, my father still bought the nasty cereal because having three boys that ate everything, whenever we got a good cereal, it'd be gone that day that it came back from the grocery store. So in his mind, in his fiscally conservative, frugal mind, he's like, if I buy this, they'll just get one bowl, and then I don't have to go back to the grocery store again this week.
That day.
Yeah. Now, for anyone wondering why I make sure my children never have to taste any morsel of King Vitamin, the cereal tastes like the cardboard it came in. I think the cardboard might taste better.
It did.
It looks like it's supposed to taste like Captain Crunch. But
Oh, that was the play. They wanted you to think that,
yeah.
but it didn't. So I got a testimony right here.
I'm about to go buy some.
You better not. Do not bring that in my house. I will burn it in the driveway. Yeah. But that's a sign of a good life, is that my PTSD is a cereal, not some other stuff. If you ever meet someone that says they like the taste of this, beware. They might be a serial killer. Just an FYI, okay?
Or a cop.
Or both. But WIC, back to the lesson. WIC became a program in 1972. Now, you didn't know that you were going to get a history lesson today, did you? But you know who my father is, so you shouldn't be surprised. WIC became a program in 1972. But in 1969, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense in LA started the free breakfast program at St. Augustine's Episcopal Church. They saw a problem in their neighborhood that children were going to school hungry. Now, there were a number of photos I wanted to choose for this because there were some photos that showed that any kid that needed food could come. Like, history tells us this is some racist, black-only program. There were black, Hispanic, white, Asian, whatever kid needed food could come and get food. I chose this picture because we have the man present in the community serving these children. They have done so many things to make men not be present in communities. One thing, this is a state-sponsored thing, is the pay for teachers. Now, I know we have some educators, this isn't me trying to placate to that, but it's a struggle if a man wants to go and be a teacher, if a man is supposed to be a provider, to go work for a very low wage, and then in a lot of cases have to work for free for a whole year. That's another message. Call your local congressman. But there's this man speaking life into these children, feeding them food for them to start their day before they go to school. Now, through the years, politicians that claim to be fiscally responsible and fiscally conservative have tried to make cuts to free lunch programs, to welfare programs. But if we don't have money in the budget for a hungry child, then we shouldn't have a budget. Because somehow or another, these same people that want to cut money to programs have billions of dollars for Ukraine. I would wager that less than 10% of us in here could find Ukraine on a map. It was near Russia. Of course it's near Russia because they fight in Russia. But if I told you, especially before the war started, find Ukraine on a map, I think maybe only one person could find it in here. And it wouldn't be me. And I'm good at geography, but I don't care about Ukraine. I ain't never thought about that place before. But we can't find Ukraine on a map, but we can find hungry children in our community. But there's a reason for this. Because of said principalities and said powers that Paul said our battle would be against. We have state-sponsored or government-sponsored drugs. We have state-funded executions by the hand of what we call the police. Well, that's another topic. Back to the free breakfast program. Now, they were not serving King Vitamin at this place either. The director of the FBI in 1969 stated that the Black Panthers Party free breakfast program was one of the biggest threats to America. This is documented in his memo because he sent it out to everybody. And it said the free breakfast program is the biggest threat domestically in America. It was showing that people were going against the design of America's capitalism and deciding to fix the problem instead of relying on the government to fix it. Because welfare doesn't fix a problem. Not relying on the powers, that goes against the system. If you have ever watched a documentary on just about any big-time drug kingpin in Central America, there is always a point where the government goes after them. And it's not because they sell drugs. It's because they started to help the poor people in their country. That was when they said, oh, we got to shut this person down because they're messing up the system. Because they don't want anyone to fix that problem. They want to put Band-Aids on gunshot wounds. But why would the director of the FBI say that the Black Panthers were the biggest domestic threat, or that their free breakfast program was the biggest domestic threat? They weren't thugs like the media and history has tried to portray them. These were college kids. The original members of the original Black Panther Party in LA were college kids. And most of them ended up getting PhDs. Like, these were nerds. Like, they weren't these thugs like that were, oh, blank the police. Like, that's not what they were doing. Like, case in point, to give you an example of how they were nerds and geeks, they literally got that name from the comic book Black Panther. Because in 1966, when Black Panther was introduced, he beat up the Fantastic Four single-handedly. And they were like, wow, that's cool. A brother beat up the Fantastic Four. And like, that's a cool name. Because they were reading comic books. They weren't thugs on the street. These were young men that went and fought for this country in the military. These original Black Panthers. And they saw this country fight for freedom for people across the world, yet saw that people in their own community were not being provided their own constitutional rights. The original group was a group of kids that fed kids and would stand peacefully by while people were arrested to make sure that they made it to jail without incident. Those are the two things that the original Black Panther Party did. Feed children and watch while people got arrested. And then watch while they go to jail to make sure they weren't being killed or beaten. But the FBI did not want this group operating, and they would plant agents to join them to do acts of violence. They would plant people in the group and say, hey guys, let's go blow up a police station. I'm going to go do it. And that was a government plan. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a fan of the Black Panthers. The FBI did this with every group. They did it with the KKK, a group I don't agree with. But they would plant people in that group and say, hey, let's go do this act of violence. And then arrest the people. Or the FBI would arrest members for crimes they didn't commit, and they would go to jail and prison without trials. Again, against those said constitutional rights. Now today, my conservative friends always talk about how the FBI is politically driven, and it's an organ, and they're crazy. They're going after people. They're going after Trump. They're just all these tactics. And I'm like, well, people have been saying that for decades. People just didn't care because they were going against black and brown people and hippies. So it was okay when they did it to them, not when the tables are turned. But the government, or as Paul would say, the powers, did not want these kids to go to school on full stomachs. So again, I asked the question, why would the director of the FBI say that this was the biggest problem in America? And I am going somewhere with this. This isn't just full history lesson. Why was this deemed dangerous? To answer this question, since no one else answered, I will use a study that was done by the Kellogg's cereal brand. When they were marketing for their cereal, shredded mini wheats. If you've ever seen a commercial, or you can Google or YouTube it so you don't think I'm making things up. But during the commercial, they would say at the end, studies show that children that ate shredded mini wheats performed better on tests than kids who didn't. Does anybody know why the kids that ate shredded mini wheats performed better than the kids that didn't?
Because they're not hungry.
They're focused.
You are correct, but there's a second part to it. Because the kids that didn't eat shredded mini wheats in this controlled test didn't eat anything. So they didn't have any food in their belly and then gave them a test. You think a child's about to pay attention to a test when they're starving? That's why it was a problem. These kids were no longer going to school hungry. I'm going to expound on that. And this is really going to be shocking, but it shouldn't be because Paul said it 2,000 years ago. Now, has anyone ever heard the saying that they build prisons based off of third grade test scores? The school to prison pipeline, they call it. Now, I'm about to show you how Brother Paul was correct, and that it's not black militant Darren up here being controversial. This just might blow your mind. So everybody knows the saying that the third grade test scores are signifiers of future criminals, right? I'm going to try to say this a little bit slow. I got to calm down. Actually, I'm going to take a sip from the sponsor and then get back to it. So, if everyone knows that the third grade test scores are signifiers of future criminals, why do they instead build new prisons instead of invest into the school system?
Because they make money on the prisons.
So, because Paul said this is who our battle is against. And people mention profits, the love of money is the root of our battles against evil forces, correct? Paul said this thing. Like everyone knows that saying. Third grade test scores future criminal. Instead of investing in said third grade, we say, no, let's go build a new prison. Let's build another prison. Let's have a private prison. Let's sell and transfer and trade, slave trade prisoners. Because when you're in prison, you are a slave. If you don't believe me, read the 13th Amendment. It says that. It says slavery is abolished unless you're a prisoner. And governors literally trade prisoners from state to state because each prisoner is worth X amount of dollars. A child prisoner, and this number is from 2013, so it's gone up. But each child prisoner yearly is worth $98,000 to the state each year. Imagine if we invested $98,000 to programs that help youth, instead of them having to beg the Van Andels and the DeVosses for every dollar. Or have banquets. Please give us $5 a month, everybody. But instead, we'll build a state-of-the-art, or not even state, because these private prison conditions are inhumane. Because they're not regulated because they're private. But Paul said, so our battle's against. That's why I've been going on this history lesson, showing you evidence of our battle. So we will instead invest in the prisons instead of investing in the school system so that those failing third graders can become better individuals. Because think about it, they know that these people are going to become criminals, like violent criminals. And how do you become a violent criminal? By doing violence against someone else. So they're willing to sacrifice the violence that this third grader will eventually do to another family, to another person. So they're willing to have murders, rapes, bank robberies, all these different things happen. They're willing to sit idly by so that they can build a prison and make money. That shows how little they care about the people, but they don't care because our battle is against the powers. Because if they really were for us, it doesn't matter what aisle of political system you follow, if they truly cared about the citizens, both sides would say, hey, we need to make these elementary schools a lot better so our citizens can be safe. Because these third graders are going up and killing people. We saw that they failed this class. We're going to just build a prison. We're not going to keep track and pour into this kid to figure out what's going on. The reason why they're okay with that is because they don't care. They don't want to fix the problem. You know, what is that saying? There's no money in the cure of a disease. Money is in the treatment. There's been numerous young scientists that have found cures for numerous cancers. They don't want that. Because they can only charge a cure one time. Here's this treatment, though. Here's this chemo. Here's this therapy. Here's this, here's this, that. We're going to keep charging the insurance company over and over and over. You're a customer for life or a customer for death. They don't want children to go to school with full bellies. They don't want fathers in the home. They want mothers on welfare. They want men in prison and on drugs. They want women promiscuous and men promiscuous. If you want proof of that, again, just look at the music that gets pushed down our throats. This false religious spirit we have in this country wants us on spiritual welfare. They want us not opening the Bible for ourselves. They want us not following the law, even though just about every book in the New Testament says to do so. Even the book of Revelation mentions the need to follow the law. And I'm talking about the Torah law, not the cop law. But just like our ancestors, the Israelites, we have experienced freedom. We don't have freedom, we've experienced freedom. Yeah, we keep wanting to go back to Egypt. Just like how they groaned to Moses about the cucumbers and the onions and the king vitamin. Well, no, they didn't say that. We're doing the same thing spiritually. We're always looking back to our spiritual bondage. Somebody tries to tell you the truth, as is mentioned in the Bible. Oh, I don't want to give up pork. I don't want to observe a Sabbath. I don't want to read the Bible. I don't want to come to, I don't want to mention anything in Bible study. I don't want to come to church and they sing all day. Oh man, there's 5 songs a day. Don't go back to Egypt. Don't go back to spiritual warfare. We don't belong in Egypt. We're not citizens of Egypt. Those people in the Bible, our ancestors, were not citizens of Egypt. They got there by bad experience because of a famine, and then they gave themselves into slavery. We do that all the time spiritually and in other situations in our lives. And then we're shown the way out, and then we're like, man, remember those cucumbers though? Those are so good. We got them for nothing. We do that all, the worst things in our lives. We find that small positive, that significant other that was abusive, rather physically or emotionally. We'll find that one positive that they had. They have all these other things working against them. We'll find that one thing, but they were good at this. We are citizens of Israel. He has an abundance waiting for us in the land of Canaan. An abundance for us to succeed. And the great thing about this abundance is that it is not a charity. Because charities and nonprofits don't actually help people. They usually keep people where they are at so that they can, because if they helped everybody out, they'd go out of business. They wouldn't have anyone to help. Like it was exposed recently about how much money the leaders of Black Lives Matter had stayed at the top, and it didn't go down to everybody. It didn't help. They did some good things. I'm not saying they were horrible, but a lot of that money stayed at the top with the top people. Now, I'm not just putting down black people, because the Red Cross takes out money every single time a disaster happens. And they'll go to where a 7.0 earthquake happened, build 5 houses after they got $1 billion and say, oh, we're good. Going back home. 5 houses don't cost $1 billion. But that money doesn't go to where it goes, because if they fixed everything, we wouldn't need the Red Cross anymore. The program, some of you might be too young to remember, there was a program called DARE, It was about not having kids do drugs. 80% of the donations went to the people, not to helping people not do drugs. I know that this message has been heavy on social constructs, but it is to show you the fight that has existed since before Paul wrote his letter to the chosen people of Ephesus. And you're like, well, why don't he open the Bible again? He looked at one or two scriptures. But again, we had to look at evidence of what Paul mentioned. I don't do 101 messages. You know, like in college, there was a class called 101. I don't do that. A mentor of mine said, what kind of people do you have at your church? He said, you must have some scholars because you're doing like advanced messages. I said, I don't know how to do anything other than that. I'm not doing them. Jesus loves us. It goes without saying. He died for us. Like, we got to get past it. Like, actually, someone mentioned that. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 5, 13 and 14. Yes, he's opening up the Bible. Oh, I forgot to show that picture. That's who we serve. The God of abundance. Not the God of welfare. Not the God of Wick. Not the God of King Vitaman. No, never. Hebrews 5, 13 and 14. Anyone who lives on milk, being still an infant, is not acquainted with the teaching about righteousness, but solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. We have to get off of milk. Anyone that's still trying to get some formula, we need to get off of that. We need to stop nursing. We are ready for solid food. Got a whole mouth of teeth, still trying to nurse. It's time to grow up. So, the messages that we do here are not going to be prosperity messages. We know that we serve the Most High of prosperity. But we're not always talking about just financially. Because prosperity can be in your good health. It can be a good marriage. It can be your children doing well. And we do well in those. Got one amen. No, I know some of y'all testimony. And we can go back to your Egypt days if you want. Right. Y'all done had the whole Nile or the Red Sea parted. Walked over on dry land trying to go back, can't swim. We are on solid food here. We are on steak, because there's some solid food that ain't good for you. We are on steak. We're not on milk anymore. We aren't spiritually on wick any longer. We need to come out of Egypt. Come out of Babylon, my people. Come out of her, my people, and be part of Israel. We can't be proud of being on spiritual welfare. Like the myth of the welfare queen. We need to stop being spiritual welfare queens. We need to not be too prideful in being ignorant. We need to not be happy being in Egypt. Because again, we constantly are trying to go backwards. Like Pastor last week talked about the person driving, looking at their rearview mirror. Like some of us are living our lives like that. Isaiah chapter 20, verse 5. I didn't have it. I purposely didn't have it on there. It doesn't even say to change it. Those who trusted in Cush and boasted in Egypt will be dismayed and put to shame. So if you're sitting there loving what you got delivered from, or who you got delivered from, you will be dismayed and put to shame, according to Isaiah. We are done putting our boast in our nation. And this isn't anti-America. I love Americans, don't love no countries. It's only one country I love, and it was named after the Most High. We need to be done putting our trust in the powers and the principalities. Who wants to stop relying on Egypt? We need to stop relying on what the Most High has delivered us from. Let's get off of spiritual welfare. Thank you, Father, for adding a blessing to the reading of the word.